Imagine, for a moment, that you have access to a time machine. You punch in the coordinates. Anywhere, USA, 1955. The air smells different here. Cleaner, perhaps. You walk down a suburban street. It's quiet. In the driveway of a modest, 3-bedroom home sits a brand new Ford Fairlane. It gleams under the sun, a mix of chrome and steel that feels built to survive a nuclear winter. You look at the house. It's solid, brick and mortar, a fireplace, a sprawling garden. Now you walk up to the front door, not to knock, but to look at the paperwork sitting on the porch table. You pick up the deed. The price listed for this brand new home, $1,200. You blink. You think it's a typo. You check the date. It's real. You wander into the local town. You walk into a diner, empty, save for the steam rising from a fresh pot of coffee. You look at the menu. A burger, fries, and a milkshake cost you 30 cents. You head to the petrol station. You fill up that massive Ford tank for $2. You check your pocket. You have a single $20 bill from 2024. In this world, in this specific server of the economic simulation, you are a king. You could buy groceries for the entire neighborhood with the loose change in your pocket. Now, snap back to today. That same house, it's crumbling now. The paint is peeling. The roof needs replacing. It hasn't been renovated in 40 years. The price tag? $400,000. That burger? $18. The petrol? $60. You look at your bank account. You're working harder than your grandfather ever did. You have more degrees. You have more technology. Your phone has more computing power than the entire NASA program that put men on the moon. And yet, you cannot afford the one thing he bought with a high school diploma and a factory job: security. Most people look at this and say, well, things just got more expensive. That's life. But what if I told you that is a lie? What if I told you that the house didn't get more expensive? The house is exactly the same. It's the ruler you're using to measure it that has shrunk. We are going to look at the mechanics of this, not the politics, not the talking points. The pure, cold engineering of the monetary system. We are going to open up the hood of the global economy and look at the engine. And what we are going to find is not a mistake. It is not an accident. It is a feature. Welcome to the hidden tax. To understand the magnitude of this, we need to stop thinking in terms of feelings and start thinking in terms of data. We need to look at the raw numbers before the government adjusters get their hands on them. Let's play a game. It's called hard mode versus easy mode. In video game design, developers often tweak the difficulty settings without telling the player. They increase the health points of the enemies, or they decrease the drop rate of loot. The game looks the same, but suddenly you have to grind for 10 hours to get the same sword that used to take 10 minutes. The economy has been patched, and you're playing on legendary difficulty without realizing it. Let's look at the stats. In 1950, the average new house in the United States cost approximately $7,354. The average family income was roughly $3,300. Do the maths. That is a price-to-income ratio of about 2.2. That means if you saved every penny you earned, you could buy a house in just over 2 years. In reality, with a mortgage, it meant a single income, usually the father's, could comfortably pay off the family home in a decade, while also supporting a wife, 3 kids, and a dog, and still saving for a summer holiday. Now, let's look at the 2024 patch notes. The median home price in the U.S. hovers around $420,000. In some cities, it is double or triple that. The median household income is around $75,000. That is a price-to-income ratio of 5.6. But wait, that's household income. In 1950, that was 1 person working. Today, that is usually 2 people working full-time. So if we compare apples to apples, 1 person working to buy 1 house, the ratio is closer to 8 or 9. The difficulty of the buy a house quest has increased by 400%. But it's not just houses. Let's look at the university tutorial level. In 1970, a year of tuition at a public university cost about $400. You could literally pay for your degree by working a summer job flipping burgers. Today, that same degree can cost $20,000 to $50,000 a year. If you tried to pay for that by flipping burgers today, you would need to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for the entire 4 years, and you would still be in debt. The mechanism is broken. The physics engine of our economy is glitching. So why is the price chart going vertical? Because we are measuring value with a ruler that is melting in our hands. Scenario time. I want you to imagine you are a diligent saver in the year 1913. You are a hard worker. You don't trust banks. You don't trust the stock market. You trust physical reality. You take $100, which in 1913 is a significant amount of money, roughly equivalent to $3,000 today, and you put it in a safe box under your floorboards. You lock it up tight. No thieves can get to it. No market crash can touch it. You leave it there for your grandson. Fast forward to today. Your grandson opens the box. The bills are crisp. They are pristine. They say $100 on the face. He takes that $100 to the grocery store. In 1913, that money could have bought him a horse or a few months of rent or enough food to feed a village. Today, he buys a few steaks, a bottle of wine, and maybe a tank of petrol. The money is still there, but the energy stored inside the money has evaporated. This is the concept you must understand if you want to survive the next 20 minutes of this video. Money is a battery. It is a storage device for your time and labor. When you go to work for 8 hours, you are trading your life force, your finite time on this earth, for a token that represents that energy. You expect that token to hold that charge so you can spend it later. But the battery has a leak. The leak is not accidental. The battery was designed to leak. The engineers who built the system drilled a hole in the bottom of it on purpose. They call this leak inflation. But a more accurate term would be currency debasement. See, inflation makes it sound like a weather event. Oh, inflation is high today, like it's humidity. It sounds passive. It sounds natural. Debasement is an active verb. Someone is doing it to you. If you bought a house for $10,000 in 1950 and sold it for $10,000 today, you would have lost 95% of your wealth. But because you sell it for $400,000, you think you made a profit. You think you're a genius real estate investor. The government taxes you on that profit. But did you actually gain any purchasing power? Or did you just run to stand still? This is the illusion of wealth. And it is the primary mechanic used to keep the middle class on the hamster wheel. Let's get technical for a moment. We need to define our terms. What is a dollar, or a pound, or a euro? Most people think it's a thing of value. It isn't. It is a metric. Think of a meter. A meter is defined by the distance light travels in a vacuum in a specific fraction of a second. It is a constant. If you build a house today and you measure it in meters, it will be the same size in 100 years. The meter doesn't change. Now imagine if the government decided that in order to make people feel taller, they were going to redefine the meter. Every year the meter gets 2% shorter. Suddenly, a man who was 1.8 meters tall is now 2.5 meters tall. He feels huge. He feels like a giant. But has he grown? No, the ruler has shrunk. This is exactly what has happened to your money. When your grandfather bought that house for $1,200, the dollar was tied to something physical. It was tied to gold. We will get into the history of this in the next chapter, but for now, just understand the physics of it. Gold is hard to mine. Therefore, the supply of gold grows very slowly, roughly 1.5 to 2% per year. This matches the rate of population growth and productivity growth pretty well. Because the supply of money was stable, prices were stable. In fact, if you look at a chart of prices in the United States from 1776 to 1913, do you know what the inflation rate was? 0. Actually, it was slightly negative. Things got cheaper over time because we got better at making them. Deflation, things getting cheaper, is the natural state of a healthy technological civilization. If I invent a robot that builds houses for half the cost, houses should become half as expensive. That is the promise of technology. So why aren't they? Because since 1913 and accelerated in 1971, we switched from a hard money operating system to a fiat operating system. Let's run another scenario. You are playing Monopoly with your family. You're winning. But your cousin is the banker, and your cousin doesn't like losing. So he grabs a piece of paper, writes $50,000 on it in crayon, and hands it to himself. He says, "I'm the bank. I can add liquidity to the system." He then offers to buy your hotel for $10,000. You look at the rule book. A hotel costs way less than that. So you think, wow, what a deal. I'm rich. You sell him the hotel. Now you have $10,000 in cash. You feel wealthy. But then you look around the board. Your cousin has printed millions. He is buying every property, every house, every railroad. The price of Baltic Avenue, the cheapest property on the board, is now bidding at $200,000. Your $10,000, which felt like a fortune 5 minutes ago, can't even buy you a get-out-of-jail-free card. You haven't become richer. You have been liquidated. This is the Cantillon Effect. When new money enters the system, it is not distributed evenly. It enters at a specific point. Usually it goes to the banks, the government, and the large corporations first. They get the new money before prices rise. By the time that money filters down to you, through your wages, prices have already risen. The elites are playing with the fresh money. You are playing with the diluted money. To understand why your house costs $500,000, we have to go back to a specific night in November 1910. Imagine you are a reporter standing on a train platform in Hoboken, New Jersey. It is late. It is cold. You see a group of men boarding a private rail car. They are carrying hunting gear, pretending to be going on a duck hunting trip. But these aren't hunters. These are the most powerful bankers in the world. They represent the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Warburgs. Together, they control a quarter of the world's wealth. They are traveling to a remote island off the coast of Georgia called Jekyll Island. For 9 days, they lock themselves in a clubhouse. They work in total secrecy. They don't even use their last names just in case the servants hear them. What were they building? They were writing the code for a new operating system for the American economy. 3 years later, on December 23rd, 1913, 2 days before Christmas, when most of Congress was at home with their families, the Federal Reserve Act was voted on and passed. This is the moment the server rules changed forever. Before 1913, if a bank made bad bets, it went bust. Game over, you lose. That is capitalism. It is brutal, but it is fair. It keeps the system clean. The Federal Reserve Act introduced a God mode for bankers. It created a lender of last resort. Basically, if the banks messed up, the Federal Reserve could print money to save them. It privatized the gains but socialized the losses. But here's the real trick. Here's the mechanic that drains your savings account. The Federal Reserve does not print money. That is a common misconception. They do something far more insidious. They print debt. When the U.S. government needs money, it doesn't just check its bank account. It issues a bond. A bond is just a fancy IOU. It says, I promise to pay you back with interest. The Federal Reserve then buys this bond. But where does the Fed get the money to buy the bond? It types it into a computer. Poof. New money is created out of thin air, backed by nothing but the promise that you, the taxpayer, will work in the future to pay it off. Every dollar in your pocket is a claim check on your future labor. It is debt. But in 1913, there was still a safety valve. The golden leash. The dollar was still backed by gold. The Federal Reserve couldn't just print trillions because they needed physical gold in the vault to back a percentage of it. The bankers hated this. It was like playing a video game with an ammo limit. They wanted the infinite ammo cheat code. And they would get it. But it would take 2 world wars and a depression to unlock it. Fast forward to 1944. The world is in ruins. Europe is burning. The old empires, the British, the French, are bankrupt. The United States, however, is standing tall. It has the factories, it has the oil, and crucially, it has the gold. In fact, by the end of the war, the U.S. held 2/3 of the world's monetary gold. Representatives from 44 nations gathered at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, to decide how the post-war economy would work. The U.S. said, look, nobody trusts your currencies anymore. Your economies are destroyed. So here's the deal. We will link the U.S. dollar to gold at $35 an ounce. And you link your currencies to the U.S. dollar. It was a pyramid structure. Top, gold. Middle, the U.S. dollar. Bottom, all other currencies. The world agreed. They didn't have a choice. This system, the Bretton Woods system, worked for a while. It ushered in the golden age of capitalism. This is the era your grandfather remembers fondly. Why did it work? Because the infinite ammo cheat was still disabled. The U.S. couldn't just print money to pay for things because if they printed too many dollars, other countries would notice. They could walk up to the gold window at the U.S. Treasury, hand over their paper dollars, and demand physical bars of yellow metal. This kept the U.S. government honest. It kept the budget balanced. It kept house prices at $7,000. But then came the 1960s. The U.S. wanted guns and butter. They wanted to fight a massive war in Vietnam and fund massive social programs at home. Both of these are expensive, very expensive. The U.S. didn't have enough tax revenue to pay for them. So what did they do? They started using the printer. They printed more dollars than they had gold. They started bluffing. They thought nobody would notice. They thought the rest of the world wouldn't do the math. But the French did the math. In 1965, French President Charles de Gaulle basically said, I see what you're doing. You are exporting your inflation to us. We don't want your paper anymore. We want our gold. France sent the French Navy to New York Harbor to pick up their gold bullion. Other countries saw this and panicked. Wait, if France takes the gold, will there be any left for us? It was a bank run. But instead of people lining up at a local branch, it was nations lining up at the U.S. Treasury. The U.S. gold reserves started draining. The vault was emptying. The U.S. had a choice. 1, stop printing money, cut spending, and cause a massive recession. 2, flip the table and change the rules of the game. Take a guess which one they chose. Sunday, August 15th, 1971. President Nixon interrupts the popular TV show Bonanza. He looks into the camera. He speaks calmly. He talks about defending the dollar and fighting speculators. Then he drops the bombshell. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the American dollar into gold or other reserve assets. Temporarily. That was 54 years ago. This is the Nixon Shock. In that one moment, the entire history of money changed. For thousands of years, money was a commodity. Salt, shells, silver, gold. It was something real. Post-1971, money became a belief system. The dollar was now backed by nothing but the full faith and credit of the United States. Basically, it was backed by the fact that the U.S. has the biggest military in the world and demands you pay taxes in their currency. The golden leash was cut. The infinite ammo cheat was enabled. Look at any chart of economic data. Choose anything. National debt, CEO pay versus worker pay, the price of gold, the cost of housing. This is what financial analysts call the WTF, happened in 1971 phenomenon. Before 1971, productivity and wages rose together. If you worked harder and made more stuff, you got paid more. After 1971, productivity kept going up, but wages flattened out. Where did the extra money go? It went to the assets, it went to the houses, it went to the stock market. Because the money supply started expanding exponentially, the price of scarce assets had to rise to match it. Scenario time. Imagine you are at a pub with your mates. You order a round. You say, "Put it on my tab." The bartender nods. He knows you. He knows you have a job. Now, imagine you own the bar, and you also own a printing press in the basement that prints the receipts. You can drink as much as you want. You can spill drinks on the floor. It doesn't matter. You just write a new receipt to pay off the old receipt. This is the U.S. government post-1971. Before 1971, they had to settle the tab with gold. After 1971, they settled the tab by writing a new tab. This allowed the government to spend money it didn't have. It allowed for endless wars. It allowed for bailouts. But there is a catch. When you print money to pay the tab, you dilute the value of every other dollar in existence. Who holds those dollars? You do. In your savings account, in your wages. Every time the government prints $1 billion to pay for a new missile or a bridge to nowhere, they are stealing a fraction of a penny from every dollar in your pocket. It is a tax, but it is a tax that nobody voted for. It is the inflation tax. And because it is invisible, you don't blame the government. You blame the grocery store owner. You blame the gas station attendant. You blame the landlord. You fight with your neighbor over the scraps, while the people running the printing press are drinking champagne in the VIP lounge. So, we have established that the money is broken. But how does this specifically translate to the housing market? Why is the roof over your head the main casualty of this monetary war? If the government is printing trillions of dollars, why isn't a loaf of bread $100? Why isn't a gallon of milk $50? I mean, we see inflation at the grocery store, sure, but it's 20%, maybe 30%. It's not the 1,000% increase we see in housing. Why the discrepancy? This brings us to the concept of the Cantillon sponge. When new money is injected into the economy, it doesn't spread out evenly. It flows like water, and water seeks the path of least resistance. It seeks a container. It seeks a store of value. See, wealthy people, the ones who get the money first, are not stupid. They know the cash is melting. They know the inflation tax is coming. So they don't keep the cash. They immediately trade that melting ice cube for something solid, something that can't be printed. They can print dollars. They can print pounds. They cannot print land. God, or geology if you prefer, stopped making land a long time ago. The supply is fixed. So when you flood the world with paper money, that money panics. It runs for safety. It pours into real estate. Real estate has become the money sponge. It soaks up the excess liquidity. This creates a terrifying distortion. Your house is no longer just a pile of bricks where you sleep and raise your kids. It has been financialized. It has been turned into a Swiss bank account with a roof. But today, because the money is broken, the house has to perform two contradictory functions. It must be affordable enough for people to live in. It must be expensive enough for boomers to retire on. It cannot be both. And the system has chosen option number 2, scenario time. Imagine you are on a sinking ship. The ship represents the value of the currency. It is going down. There are only a limited number of lifeboats. These lifeboats represent hard assets, things that hold value. Gold, fine art, Bitcoin, and real estate. Housing is the biggest lifeboat. Everyone is trying to get into the lifeboat, not because they love lifeboats, but because they don't want to drown. In a normal economy, you buy a house because you need shelter. In a fiat economy, you buy a house because you are terrified of holding cash. This panic creates artificial demand. It means you are not just competing with other families who want a home. You are competing with pension funds trying to beat inflation. You're competing with foreign investors trying to get their money out of their own failing currencies. You're competing with corporations like BlackRock who need a safe place to park billions of dollars. They don't care about the school district. They don't care about the kitchen layout. They care about the yield. But it's not just the demand from investors. It's the mechanism of how we buy houses that keeps the prices high. It's the mortgage. The word mortgage comes from Old French. Mort means death. Gage means pledge. The death pledge. Here is the dirty secret of the banking industry. Banks create money when they issue a loan. Most people think that when a bank lends you $400,000 to buy a house, they're lending you other people's savings. That is a fairy tale. In reality, when you sign that mortgage paper, the bank types $400,000 into your account. They created that money ex nihilo, out of nothing. The collateral for that new money is the house itself. This creates a feedback loop from hell. 1. Banks lend money essentially for free. 2. People can now afford to bid higher prices. 3. Because people bid higher, house prices go up. 4. Because house prices go up, the collateral is worth more. 5. Because the collateral is worth more, banks feel safe lending even more money. If we lived in a world without 30-year mortgages, if you had to pay cash for a house or pay it off in 5 years, houses would cost $50,000. Why? Because that is all anyone could actually pay. The price of an asset expands to fill the available credit. The 30-year fixed-rate mortgage is a government-subsidized tool designed to pump money into the housing market. And who benefits? The banks, the government, the existing homeowners. Who loses? You, the new entrant, the young. You are the exit liquidity for the Ponzi scheme. Let's visualize this with a simple mechanic. Imagine you are running on a treadmill. You're running at 10 kilometers per hour. This is your work. This is your productivity. You're running fast enough to reach the house prize at the end of the track, but the track is moving backwards. The track is the currency devaluation. In the 1950s, the track was stationary. If you ran, you got there. In the 2020s, the track is moving backwards at 15 kilometers per hour. You're sprinting. You're working 2 jobs. But the house is getting further away. And the people on the sidelines, the boomers who bought in 1980, they shout at you, "Run faster, you're just lazy." They don't see the treadmill. They don't see that the ground beneath your feet is moving. So you are trapped. The government is printing money to devalue your wages. The banks are printing credit to inflate the asset prices. And your neighbors are banning new construction, NIMBYs, to ensure scarcity. It feels like checkmate. But there is a way out. First, stop listening to the government's inflation numbers. They are gaslighting you. They use a trick called substitution. If steak gets too expensive, they swap it for hamburger in the inflation basket and say prices didn't go up, but your standard of living crashed. For most people, the real inflation rate is closer to 10 or 15% a year. That means if you aren't making 15% more money every single year, you're getting poorer. So, how do you fight back? In a high inflation environment, defense is more important than offense. Defense means don't hold the melting ice cube. You need a shield. You need hard assets. Something with finite supply and no counterparty risk. Let's look at what worked for 5,000 years. When Rome collapsed, when the Weimar Republic collapsed, what survived? Gold and silver. Remember the house price? In 1950, a house cost roughly 210 ounces of gold. Today, a house costs roughly 210 ounces of gold. Read that again. Priced in dollars, the house went up 5,000%. Priced in gold, the house stayed exactly the same. The house didn't get expensive, the dollar collapsed. If your grandfather had kept his savings in gold instead of dollars, you could still buy that house today for the same amount of metal. This is the secret the wealthy know. They don't measure their wealth in dollars. They measure it in ounces, in acres, in shares. The dollar is just the grease. It is not the engine. Silver is an even more interesting case study. Historically, the gold to silver ratio was 15 to 1. Today, it is hovering around 80 to 1. This suggests that silver is either incredibly undervalued or gold is incredibly overvalued. So here's the plan to exit the matrix. 1. Stop saving in cash. Keep enough for emergencies, but move the rest. 2. Invest in skills. They cannot inflate away your ability to do something useful. 3. Lower your time preference. Plan for a decade from now. 4. Invest in reality. Hard assets, gold, silver, real estate, Bitcoin. Let's go back to that time machine one last time. You're standing in front of that $1,200 house. You realize now that the $1,200 wasn't cheap. It was just sound. It represented a fair exchange of labor for shelter, undistorted by the printing press. You look at the $20 bill in your hand, the one from 2024. In 1955, that $20 bill is a king. In 2024, it is a pauper. The paper is the same. The ink is the same. The trust is gone. The hidden tax of inflation is the price we pay for allowing the government to manage the money supply. It is the fee for the infinite ammo cheat code. We cannot turn back the clock, but we can learn the lesson of history. Paper dies. Promises are broken. Physics remains. Don't bet on the paper. Bet on the physics. Invest in reality. Stay chill. Stay solvent.